Welcome to Greek for a Week. I'm glad that you are viewing this week's video. And this week we are looking at two verses 11 and 12 of chapter 2. I will be diagramming this particular passage. Again, this is part of a larger paragraph that really goes through the rest of chapter 2, but I'm breaking it down into sections so that it's a little bit more manageable and easier to talk through and kind of digest a little bit. I want to also make you aware of something that is new. You can see down at the bottom of this particular slide, you can also go to www.greekforaweek.org, and that will also take you to the videos, and that will provide you an up-to-date look at Greek for a week. So as we go to the next slide, I want to make mention here again some things that, where do we get the diagram from? How do we put it all together? Well, you're going to see here, you're going to see the fact that he uses a term of endearment to introduce this section, the word beloved, and the fact that he's urging or encouraging them to do something. And so we'll talk through that. But also, you're going to see that there's a participle here, specifically having your conduct, and then what is important about that conduct and how should that conduct, if you will, play itself out so that you are a good citizen within your community. All right, so let's look at the next couple of slides and we'll kind of see how these verses come together. So as I said, this is Peter's way of introducing this particular paragraph, and that is beloved. You are my beloved ones. It's a term of endearment. I urge you. Okay, now he begins to take on a role. That is, you are aliens and you are strangers. So the role that you're taking on as those aliens and strangers, I'm specifically urging you to abstain from, again, the fleshly lusts. Now, again, we talked through that infinitive here, and we suggested that it indicated indirect discourse because it came from a term of communication, the fact that I urge you, as opposed to a complementary infinitive. The lusts which wage war against the soul. Then you get into verse 12. Now, this I've basically labeled a contest here, the participle, as an attendant circumstance, which is why I included the word while. So, while having this good conduct, that is, you are to abstain from the fleshly lusts. For what purpose? So that with reference to that which they accuse you of wrongdoing. Really, I think what Peter's saying here, the reference that Peter's making is, hey, if they accuse you of wrongdoing, okay, you're still having that good conduct is the point. And then if you have that good conduct, ultimately, causal participle here, ultimately, because they observe your good works or your good conduct, what will happen? Well, that they may glorify God when in the day of visitation. So again, you're basically looking at one main point in these two verses. I'm urging you to abstain from fleshly lusts. Ultimately, I'm pointing you toward a good conduct so that everybody that observes you, right, it might get to the point where they glorify God. So I think if I wanted to make an outline, I think I'd basically be looking at this. I would try to communicate the concept of, I'm urging you, says Peter. I'm urging you to abstain from having a poor conduct. Rather, what am I urging you to do? And that is to have a good conduct. I think ultimately you could really boil these two verses down to this concept of being a good citizen, and really by way of application, what is it in your community in which you live? What does that good citizen look like? And of course, everybody's community is different. Doesn't mean that being good is different, but the way that you apply being good is different, again, based on your community. Trust this has been helpful. Again, we'll look further into this paragraph, obviously, by moving on to verse 13 and 14. So trust you'll have a good rest of this week. There's verses 11 and 12 of chapter 2.